Good evening, folks. We'll get started. We've got just about the group I had anticipated. In fact, I'm rather happy with the people who are here. With the excuses of time change, spring break, I can't get up, all that other kind of stuff, y'all are real troopers. We will go through Answers for Life. Doesn't distant starlight prove the universe is older than the Bible would suggest? Is the Big Bang all worked out? Incidentally, I'll give you a quick hint. No, it ain't. Do creationists have answers for the lifetime problem? And we do. And we'll get to those rather complex answers today. I still recommend the stuff from Genesis Apologetics. Great stuff for any age, but especially for students. We will start the Christian Finances class now on April 12 at 6:30 on Wednesdays. This Tuesday we will have Biology and Animals That Defy Evolution. That's a multimedia presentation by me at our monthly meeting at Faith Lutheran. Today, doesn't distant starlight prove the universe is older than the Bible? The next two were scheduled for the Defaithing of America, Creation Courts in Our Culture, Incredible Creatures Defy Evolution. We will let you decide at the end whether we're going to do that or the two alternatives. Please do pray for our ministry. We'll open with prayer in just a moment. I'll tell you when you can see someone who's guided by the Spirit. I don't know whether you saw our pastor's sermon today, but that guy was Spirit-led. I have experienced that when I'm correctly prayed up and in the Spirit and just feel the guidance of Him. And Jeff was feeling that today, even after I messed with him. We have a new communique out. They're over there in hard copy, and also you will get them by tomorrow via email if you signed up. They pause puberty, but there's a cost. State-sponsored child abuse in America. We're talking about the transition of young children to another gender. 6 reasons Christians should embrace six-day creation. That's an article by Dale Tackett, who wrote the Truth Project. And Our Miraculous Existence, which is another person talking about the reasons to believe the Bible is real history and telling us the exact truth, along with our Genesis commentary. That's all in our monthly communique, which is just out. We do have our radio program, which is in 12 U.S. household communities as well as 120 countries. Had a real interesting conversation about 5 months ago. Had a woman call me. We've got one of our radio stations that's transmitting our radio program is in Albuquerque. And she said, hey, you need to get them to stop cutting their wattage at night, because that's what a lot of radio stations do. She said, we're not getting great reception because we're about 100 miles south of Albuquerque. But then she started to lecture me on how the Bible taught that the earth was flat. And I said, no, that's not. And she ended up, she's probably not listening to our program anymore. But you get a lot of people with a lot of different attitudes about what the Bible says and what the universe is, and that impinges on what we're going to talk about today.
So when you look at the picture of the Earth from the moon, is it like we're looking at the top of the pizza? I mean, how's it work?
It's round.
Well, it's also like looking at a basketball. You have basketball here. You look at it, what do you see? You see a circle.
March 25, we will have Brilliant Made in the Image of God, using the Search for the Truths, the Rocks Cry Out series. That's at Feast. And I think I'm out of warm-up material. Any thoughts or questions before we get into Distant Starlight? Nope. All right, then I got to change programs.
Good. How about you?
The product you see is one of mine and Dr. Daniel Harris, our resident astronomer on our board. Great deep thinker in terms of creation science and astronomy and astrophysics. Here's a cartoon from Answers in Genesis. There are galaxies in our universe that are far, far away. So the universe must have come into being a long time ago, billions of years. According to the Bible, God made the stars on Creation Day 4. That was only about 6,000 years ago, and they call that Star Wars. And that is kind of a battle that goes on with people as to, is the Bible really believable? Can we make sense of it with what we're being told in schools and in the public media and in science? The current propaganda, and I do not use that word lightly, is the Big Bang is a fact of science and has all been worked out and verified scientifically. The truth is nothing could be further from the truth. The Big Bang is not just not worked out. I'm going to show you some data from what we found in the last 3 or 4 months from the new James Webb Space Telescope that is blowing up the Big Bang. Yes?
I thought they quit going with the Big Bang.
Oh, no. No. Still very committed to the Big Bang. That's what JWST was constructed for, was to look back at the red, infrared galaxies from 13 billion years ago.
But then again, I know when.
But to show you how far the Big Bang is from observable science, we'll have to educate you a bit. And you ought to underline that or put exclamation marks around the word bit, because there's a lot of stuff here.
Yeah.
The Big Bang is the preeminent theory. I don't know what somebody told you they were going with, Joe, but anybody not talking about the Big Bang right now is out of science. The origin of the universe via natural processes. When he first heard about this, Sir Frederick Hoyle, an astrophysicist out of England 50 years ago, said, he made a joke, because at that point they were talking about the hot burst or something like that. They didn't have the name. He called it the Big Bang as a joke, because he thought it was a joke. Sadly, his joke stuck. Yes?
I don't want to belabor this, just one more question. Isn't it a non-starter when you look at it and say, science tells us you can't get anything from nothing, so where'd all the stuff come
It
from?
violates the first law of thermodynamics. That doesn't stop them. And in the first half second after the Big Bang, you have an inflation of all material in the universe to multiple thousands of times the speed of light, which violates the speed of light, the general relativity. It only violates the laws of physics twice in the first half second. It says that all matter was in a point of infinite density and temperature. You had a point at the size of the point of a pin in which all the matter, energy, and everything in the universe was contained.
Oh, that's really good.
Yeah, where'd that come from? 13.8 billion years ago, this cosmic egg exploded, releasing matter, energy, space, and time that eventually evolved and self-organized into stars, galaxies, and planets. Have you ever seen anything self-organized? No. There's an old story about a preacher in a small town that had a train station in it. And every day at noon, he would come out and sit and watch the train go by. And one day a conductor came out and said, you know, Pastor, you come out and watch this train every day. Why do you watch this train go by? He says, that train comes by here every day at 12 noon and does it without me pushing it. And that's the only thing in town that does anything without me pushing it. Things don't self-organize. It's a theory with no data to explain its origins. You touched upon this, Joe. They say there was a quantum instability in the nothing, and out of that quantum instability, this is a lot of hand waving is what it is, came everything. Can that be proved or shown in a laboratory experiment?
No.
Never replicated. Therefore, it's not science. This is philosophy. There are three pillars for the Big Bang: the origin of elements, the expansion of the universe, and cosmic microwave background radiation. We're going to touch upon those three pillars. and show that none of them have improved or shown. You have a problem of size and age. That's Edwin Hubble from the 1920s. Hubble's first measured age of the universe gave 1 billion years based on expansion. What's the problem with the universe being 1 billion years old according to the evolutionists? Our solar system is supposed to be 4.5 billion. The Earth is supposed to be 4.5 billion. So how can the Earth and the Sun be older than the whole universe? This was unacceptable to paleontologists, astronomers, and a whole group of people. Now, Hubble only getting measures of close galaxies due to the limit of telescopes. He needed a 200-inch, which wasn't available at that point and would become later. The first measurement system that they had for measuring how far away stuff was a system of trigonometry called parallax. Parallax we're pretty certain about. For example, how do we figure out that Alpha Centauri, our closest star, actually it's called Proxima Centauri because it's a multiple star system, is 4.2 light years away? Well, we get a measurement of the angle from Earth in spring to that thing, which turns out, which I'm trying to remember, it turns out to be something like 0.53, it should be 53 degrees. And then 6 months later, in the fall, we get another viewing of that, and from that we get two angles. We also know we were on one side of the sun in the spring and another side in the fall. That's 93 million miles plus 93 million miles, which forms 186 million miles for the bottom of a triangle. With those two angles, we can now figure out the length of those sides and therefore the length of the other side by trigonometry. So we're pretty sure that Alpha Centauri, and Proxima Centauri is 4.2 light years away. There are 6 other methods to do that because that system only works for close stars. What happens with a star or galaxy that's very far away? When we go from one side of the sun to the other, there's no difference in angle because they're so far away.
Same angle.
And so you can no longer use parallax. Walter Baade found distinct stellar populations during World War II, older and younger stars. So they had an age problem early on in the 1920s and 30s. Turned out all close Cepheid variables, these are stars that pulsate, pulse in less than 10 days, they're metal rich, show heavy elements, are larger and brighter. All those far away in galaxies were type 2 Cepheids detected by Hubble in Andromeda in 1924, and their pulsation periods are between 10 and 100 days. In 1950, Baade and his nearby Cepheids of a different type than those used by measured galaxies. What he figured out was the type of Cepheids we're seeing in the Milky Way are different from the Cepheids in other galaxies. When this was understood, their estimate of the size of the universe doubled. Now the astronomers were getting happy because now the universe is getting older. At this point, it's only about 4 to 5 billion years old. The universe is now big enough and velocity small enough to make the universe older than the age of the stars, which it had not previously been. By the 1970s, they had gotten up to the point to where they thought the universe was between 10 and 20 billion years old. This has an establishment of the oldest stars 10 to 15 billion years old based on how long they assumed it takes them to burn up all their hydrogen before they go nova or go dwarf. Now, there was an idea of a cold Big Bang had been considered before without an explosion and all of that type of stuff. George Gamow, Apper, and Herman came up with the hot Big Bang. In 1948, it was predicted that the cosmic microwave background radiation with an estimated 50 to 5 degrees Kelvin. Now I don't know if you understand the Kelvin thermometer. If you get down to 0 degrees Kelvin, which is incidentally we think is theoretically impossible, that's when there's no movement. The electrons stop moving around the nucleus. That is negative 459.67 degrees Fahrenheit. That is perfect cold, no heat, no energy. They were thinking that if we find energy in space, because in space there should be almost nothing, of between 50 and 5 degrees, that's still, 50 degrees Kelvin is still around negative 400 degrees below zero. It's not much heat. But if we find that across the sky, it shows the echo of the Big Bang. Now, this was supposedly confirmed by Penzias and Wilson in Bell Labs in 1964. They weren't looking for it. What they were trying to do was they were setting up microwave towers, and they had their microwaves interfered with by radiation in the background. If you ever had an old TV set and you turned it on when there was no channel on that, no reception on that channel, and you saw this, what, fuzz or interference, that is the microwave background radiation. Anyway, they measured it at 3 degrees Kelvin, which is close to what was predicted. And they said, wow, we found the echo of the Big Bang. Robert Dick of Princeton University interprets their find as the cosmic background radiation. Problem is, does it really match up? The next 25 years, they try to match it to the Big Bang. Our atmospheric water vapor blocks easy observation of the microwave radiation. Not until satellites got above the atmosphere could we measure the background radiation. And they did that with a first satellite called WMAP, or WMAP. When they get a picture of the sky via satellite, the background radiation is too uniform. This background radiation should be clumpy. It should have more energy, of course, where the stars are, where the galaxies are, and where there's nothing, it should be far less. But it was too uniform. A steady microwave radiation found in every direction in space at about 2.73 Kelvin. Now again, 2.73 Kelvin is almost nothing. It's incredibly small. It is claimed to be the residual radiation of the Big Bang. Here's the proof for the Big Bang happened. This background radiation was predicted by Big Bang cosmology, and finding it was hailed as proof of the theory. Now, here's what they actually found. Now we're going back, clear back to the 1960s and 70s. When they first got the data, this is what they got from WMAP. Again, it's supposed to be perfectly good. But that was measuring, because WMAP could only measure down to about 50 Kelvin. It couldn't measure colder than that. When they tried to push it beyond its ability to measure down below 0.001, down less than 1,000th of a degree, they got these pictures. Oh, wow, we're getting the lumpiness we need. But to do it, they had to go what? Beyond the capabilities of their machine to even measure. So that could be just more mess, more bad data. Contrary to the Big Bang prediction, it was perfectly uniform in previous data until they approached or went past the limit of their sensors. If the Big Bang happened as described, background radiation came to Earth from the furthest edge of the universe. This is called the horizon problem. If there was a bang one place in the universe and it spread out, what would we expect to happen nearby that explosion and far away from that explosion? Much more intense heat close to the explosion, far cooler away from the explosion, billions of light years away from the explosion. And yet this thing is constant everywhere. That's what they call the horizon problem. And that's why they invented something that had never been thought of before called inflation to solve that problem. Following that logic, the X-ray emitting clusters of galaxies nearest our own Milky Way should all cast energy shadows. However, recent observations have been done concluding that there is a lack of shadows in places where there should be. It starts to look like this is not the background radiation, the echo of the Big Bang. Questionable whether it exists in the form described by the Big Bang. It is far too homogeneous until we stretch our sensors past the point of reliability. The lack of radiation shadows further confirm that the background radiation we're looking at is something else, not the echo of the Big Bang. The growth of galaxies, clusters, and superclusters turned out to be way too short for these things to form. The estimate of gas coming together, dust coming together, forming solar systems, forming stars, and then those forming into groups or clusters or galaxies, for just galaxies it ought to take 100 billion years. And they say the universe is only about 13.8 billion years. Forget superclusters of galaxies clumping together. So that's a problem. They even have to fudge their data just to squeeze in time to form galaxies. All other forms are way out of sight. And what do we see when we look at the supposedly oldest stars at the near time of their birth, 400 million years? What Webb is now showing us, the newest space telescope, which is trailing 1,000,000 miles behind the Earth in Earth's orbital circle in what's called a Lagrange point. It's a balance of gravity point, 1,000,000 miles behind us. They're finding galaxies, mature galaxies, galaxies with carbon, heavy elements in them, which are somewhere, according to their measurements of redshift, between 200 and 280 million years old. According to the Big Bang, there shouldn't have been time for those galaxies to structure themselves. In point of fact,
velocity distort time?
huh?
Doesn't velocity distort time?
Velocity will distort time, but again, this is what JWST was constructed for, is to see to those points. And if the Big Bang were true, after the explosion, they theorized that there should have been a 400 million year period in which there was a formation of nothing. The plasma was so hot, the gas was so dispersed that nothing would have formed for 400 million years, and yet they're finding mature galaxies within those that are bigger than the Milky Way. And again, this is what I described here. The James Webb Telescope, it was supposed to find population 3 stars. We're going to get into elements in just a moment, but one of the things from the Big Bang is it was so hot and so quick that it only would have produced very low-level elements like hydrogen, beryllium, etc. Low, small atoms, small molecules. And the early stars would have all been made up of these simple elements, population 3 stars. Population 3 stars are a concept in a physicist's mind. We have never found one in our solar system or out there in the universe anywhere. Webb was supposed to find population 3 stars. Are we finding any? No. Mature galaxies in the first 400 million years, which are supposed to be the dark age. That's a problem. They found 2 stars, or 2 galaxies with stars in them that are supposedly, according to redshift, older than the universe. Now, incidentally, what is the new evolutionary idea? How are they going to solve this? They're not going to throw away the Big Bang. What they're going to say is instead of the universe being 13.8 billion, maybe it is 20 billion years old. Every time they run into a problem, they fudge it. And again, there's no young population 3 stars, and there's carbon out there. Supposedly, carbon and everything above carbon, the heavy elements, were constructed by these first stars, and inside those stars, these heavy elements like uranium and other things were all made inside there, lithium, etc. And then when they exploded as supernovas, they distributed this stuff all over the universe, and we are made out of star stuff. The problem is they're not finding those population 3 stars. There's not time for this distribution according to their system. And we're finding these heavy elements in the very youngest stars. It's as if everything had been created in an instant from the beginning. Oh, wait a minute, I know a book that says that. We look at meteorites as leftovers of the formation of the solar system. Most are initially iron, which is a heavy element, but later found to be rocky. Also measured what was in the sun and extrapolated elements for the rest of the universe. We looked at our solar system and said, okay, here's what's in our solar system, so that's what should be in the rest of the universe. Does it match? And the answer is no. We're an oddball in terms of elements. Okay, well, then what was made in our solar system ought to be what's in the interstellar medium. There ought to be hydrogen, carbon, beryllium, and all of these types of lithium floating around out there in space. There is stuff floating around out there in space, but is it the right stuff? Nope. The Big Bang was predicted to proceed so fast as not able to produce heavy elements. How do we get heavy elements? Answer: formed inside stars, which I explained a moment ago. As temperature and pressure yield a furnace to convert hydrogen and helium to produce heavy elements like carbon and on up. Modeling the Big Bang requires arbitrary numbers to be given for the temperature and density of a given time of the explosion. The relationship will give you the amount of hydrogen, helium, lithium, beryllium, boron, and then able to compare this to predicted abundances. The physical equations, because were they there at the start of the universe? Nope. So they've got to guess how hot the Big Bang was. If they set it at a certain temperature, you get a certain amount of hydrogen and a certain amount of boron or beryllium. If you set it at a higher temperature, that changes the abundances of these things. No matter what temperature they set it at, they can't get the right abundances for what we observe in the universe. It don't work. This stuff is not all figured out. When you listen to it in science, this is settled science. It's a fact of nature. The Big Bang happened 13.8 billion years ago, and we know it to be true, and you don't need God. Folks, it's not all worked out. There are weird AP stars burning at about 10,000 Kelvin that have really oddball abundances of heavy metals, which doesn't fit the scheme at all. You have lithium stars, extremely high abundance of lithium. That's a real problem. Lithium is an unstable element. It's a heavy element, and when it goes into stars, it should be convected to the center of the star where it will be broken up. The hydrogen pressures in there will not form it, but break it up. The fact that we find a lot of lithium stars shows these stars are extremely young, not old. And that's what I just told you with lithium. Beryllium abundance anomaly. Once you set your variables in the Big Bang production of hydrogen versus helium, we do not get the right amount of lithium, beryllium, boron, and other elements. Again, no matter how you set this equation, you don't get the right answer. It looks as if the whole universe was designed specifically with purpose by an individual. I know another book that does, the same book that says that. Looking at faint ancient stars, we see far more beryllium than predicted. Stars with elements produced only in the Big Bang, not in the stars themselves, such as a heavy element should not be there. Not consistent, incompatible with the Big Bang. It's not all worked out. The Big Bang's prediction of elements produced does not fit no matter how you adjust the variables. They've been playing with these variables and coming up with different theories to how to get what we see in the universe for the past 60 years, and guess what? It ain't figured out yet. The carbon, etc., which our Earth is made of, is assumed to all have been formed by these heavy elements ejected from dead stars. The interstellar dust medium is not consistent with assumed equilibrium of Big Bang and ejected material. Our solar system ought to have been made by the leftover stuff that we see out in the solar system and outside of our solar system, but it's not the right stuff. The plot worsens. Everything heavier than bismuth has no way to be produced in the universe. They used to think you get these heavier elements such as gold, etc., to be formed by what's called the R process, in which iron atoms are bombarded by a freak amount of neutrons to form heavier elements. Problem: when you continue to bombard these heavy elements via neutrons, it tends to break them up and not make them. Worse still, there's nowhere in the universe where we can find enough neutrons to bomb it the way we want to. It's not all worked out. That's what I just said. We have never found a place in the universe where we could get enough neutrons. We used to think there was enough neutrons in supernovas, but the new modeling of supernovae even eliminates this possibility. So heavy element production in the universe is dependent on a theory which doesn't work theoretically, has never been observed, and we have not even found a place in the universe where it could have occurred. This is like God signing his name and saying, I made this. This can't happen by accident. This can't form itself. The Big Bang cannot explain the existence of heavy elements. No matter how they fudge, the numbers don't come out right. Early stars with heavy metals is inconsistent, should not be, and that's what we're seeing from the James Webb Telescope. Lithium stars argue for a young age. Interstellar dust is not the right stuff, and it's not all worked out, even though that is what the astronomy community will tell you. We've got this all figured out. It's a pure lie. On this day, there was a Big Bang. Spectral lines come in two types: emission lines that are light on dark and absorption lines that are dark on light. When the frequencies do not line up, the spectrum is shifted, with red towards the longer end and blue towards the shorter end. See, I told you that there are 7 ways that they measure how far away stars and galaxies are. The closest ones we're pretty sure about, like Alpha Centauri, because it was measured by trigonometry and parallax. There are other systems such as spectral parallax. There is luminosity and apparent luminosity. But for the farthest things, the only thing that we think might work is redshift. If something is moving away from you, the wavelength to you is stretched, and therefore it appears red on the spectrum. If it's moving towards you, those wavelengths are compressed and you get a blue thing. Incidentally, what you should see, if this is true, is you should see a mixture of blue things that are moving towards us and redshifted things moving away from us. But almost everything in the universe is what? Redshifted.
Isn't that what they use to prove Big Bang Theory? Because everything is going out.
Part of the prediction of the Big Bang is you would have an expansion. Einstein predicted that there wouldn't be an expansion, that it would collapse on itself. When Hubble showed that there was expansion in 1924, Einstein had to retract what he was saying. We then had a measurement of redshifts across the universe in 1998, which shows there was expansion, if redshift means what we think it does. I'm going to discuss that. There's Hubble again. When Hubble discovered the galactic redshift, he interpreted it as Doppler shift. Doppler being a shift in frequency according to motion. He interpreted that it meant motion. Does it have to mean motion? No, it doesn't. But that's been the interpretation. A redshift indicates the source is moving away from the observer. A blue shift indicates the source is moving towards the observer. Now, that gentleman pictured up there is Georges Lemaitre. Lemaitre was a Catholic priest and professor of mathematics. He came up with a theory of redshift caused by wavelength of light being stretched in transit by continual expansion of space. And again, we continue with this idea of everything expanding. Incidentally, the Bible says that the universe was expanded. What does it say? That the whole universe was what? Rolled out like a scroll. It also talks in another scripture about the expansion of the universe as God spread out the heavens. This is why some people want to equate the Bible with the Big Bang. And they have some similarities, but they have such problems that they can't both be true. Galactic redshift suggests expanding space-time, which fits the theory of the Big Bang. Problem is, space is always expanding, then why is only the space between galaxies expanding and not the space inside galaxies, solar system, and each planet's expanding? Why during the time, if the whole universe is expanding, why doesn't the space between me and you expand just during the hour we're here? That's a problem. There are other theories. That's Dr. Humphreys, a creationist. He has an idea of an expanding timeless bubble, which I'll go into with more detail later. Basically what he said was, day one, God created the heavens and the earth, everything around here. Then he went to day 2, 3. When he gets to the sun, moon, and stars, he creates those in a timeless bubble across the entire universe, and then he withdraws that bubble. As he withdraws the timeless bubble, everything at the edge of the universe experiences what? Large amounts of time. And here at the center, we experienced only the amount of time after the bubble was taken away. There's another theory by Miyoshi Carnelli and John Hartnett called cosmological relativity that predicts redshift as a consequence of the curvature in an added dimension of space, and I'll go over that one in a minute. Now, there are alternative redshift explanations. Dr. Halton Arp, who's, poor gentleman's dead now, he's right there. This guy was not a creationist. In fact, he wasn't even a Christian. But he and other astronomers had discovered evidence that the universe isn't expanding as taught. Instead, observations indicate that redshifts are likely due to other mechanisms, maybe the atomic mass within them, inside galaxies, and not due to Doppler effect, not due to motion. If the universe is not expanding, then the Big Bang is falsified. The variation of mass also disproves radiometric dating, since decay rates would change as the mass of protons and electrons change. Every radiometric dating system that we go through to measure how old a rock is based on the idea that they are all decaying at a very predictable same rate. If proton and electron decay varies, then you can't make any predictions at all, because you don't have an automatic rate. These discoveries lead us to conclude that the assumptions about age and size of the universe may be incorrect. Problem is, we've never been out there. We can't check that the Andromeda galaxy is actually over 1 trillion light years away. In an effort to suppress this, astronomy's denied Dr. Arp telescope time. This guy's got a bad theory. We need to make sure he doesn't get any time to prove it, because it doesn't agree with the propaganda, with the party line. Today in science class, I learned the Big Bang is real. But you believe in biblical creation, don't you? Yes, I do. I just questioned the fact of evolution, and blam, you should have seen the explosion. That's all you got to do, folks, is start questioning what people are saying and doing. This data has been piling up, and data was suppressed. In 2003, the Hubble telescope released a picture of a system of a quasar and a galaxy called Markarian 205 with the matter bridge suppressed. Here's the picture NASA released. Here's an infrared picture, and notice what do I see between the quasar and the galaxy. There's a matter bridge. These two things are connected. When NASA published the photo, they took it out of the infrared and took down the darkness until the matter bridge was no longer seen. Why did they do that? They did that because this thing has a redshift showing that is about 500 trillion light years away, and this has a redshift showing that it's about 700 trillion light years away. They should not be connected, but we have physical evidence showing that they're connected. Therefore, one of those redshifts is wrong. These nearby objects with high redshifts are a forbidden subject in astronomy. They won't even talk to you about it. 3C273, the first quasar detected a redshift of 0.158. It's the brightest of quasars at the center of a local supercluster. Problem: that redshift is far brighter than the rest of the supercluster that's supposed to be moving together as a group. Those redshifts should be the same if they are moving at the same speed and the same distance away. When you take an ultraviolet spectrum, you get 10 clouds of differing redshift spectrum. This should not be. There should be consistency to this data. We have objects whose redshifts read 24 to 130 times faster than a surrounding galaxy. This cannot be. If something's within a galaxy or near a galaxy, it should be traveling at approximately the same speed, not 130 times faster. A normal galaxy, NGC 250 at the center with quasars around it, whose redshift vary dramatically, are paired in terms of their redshift with each other. The quasars have the same redshift within the galaxy, but the galaxy has a different redshift. This starts to make us give us the idea that redshift is more about how they're made rather than Doppler effect, their motion. And that's what I just said at the bottom. This is not a rare observation. Many examples exist of quasars showing within galaxies with like redshift to each other, but vary from the redshift of the nearby galaxy radically. Hubble believed redshift is a function of age of the object rather than its velocity. That tadpole galaxy has a long trailing arm material which is more resembles a brushstroke of an artist, God, than an evolutionary process. I believe there are places all over the universe where God signed his hand and said, I made this. Galaxies with an active nucleus producing radio waves always have a higher redshift than galaxies with inactive nuclei. And this was according to an evolutionist named Tift. Folks, again, what is redshift supposed to be? It's supposed to be about motion, how fast it's moving away from us. Why should it giving off radio waves change its redshift? It shouldn't, unless redshift is something we don't understand. Gravity is another likely cause of redshift. Conclusion, there are some close pairs of quasars and galaxies which have the same redshift. ARP has found pairs of galaxies which are physically interacting with each other, and we can see them connected and close, yet they have different redshifts. Redshift does not always mean what we believe, which means motion. After teaching his congregation the week in Genesis 1 with millions of years long, Pastor Joe found they applied his teaching to their lives when the following Sunday, nobody showed up. It hadn't been a million years yet for the next day. Interesting data that just came out this past month. What's happening with churches all across the country in America in terms of attendance? Attendance is going down. Methodists, down 25% in the past 20 years. Presbyterians, down 33% in the past 20 years. Two interesting groups violate that plummeting. One group that's just about stable has lost only 2%, that's Southern Baptist. And that 2% is probably due to the fact that we did not control our wayward youth directors and tried to cover that up like the Catholics did with priests. But evangelical Bible churches have gone up by 10 to 15% during that same period of time. Another set of data. The churches that have not held strictly to a literal Bible, who have said abortion is all right, you can ordain gays and transgenders, you can have open divorce, there may not be a hell. Churches that have compromised like that, guess what's happening to all of them? Their attendance is dying. Now, why are they doing those things? To try and draw in the community. But as Joe, when you sent out a picture this week that says, when there's no difference between the church and the community it's in, why should they show up for church? And so they did this, all this compromising to try and convince people to come, and what they've done is blown themselves up. The evangelical churches and the Southern Baptist churches, which have held the line on believing the Bible from the very first verse, those are the ones who are either steady or their attendance is going up. That's encouraging. It tells us how to do it right.
I got a weird question.
Yes. You only got weird questions, Joe.
Okay. Have you been here as long as I've been here? At this church?
About the same. You've been here longer.
Call it 10 years.
You've been here about a year longer.
Okay, so you're there and I'm here.
Uh-huh.
The universe has been expanding in these 10 years.
Yep.
Now, there's no different in our distance, but maybe there is. So if this is the Earth, if everything's expanding in the universe, the Earth would be expanding. That means you and I would be expanding. That means you and I would keep getting bigger, and the space between us would appear to us to be the same, even though everything's getting further apart.
But the Earth's diameter has not changed during that period of time, and our distance from the sun is still 93 million miles.
Never mind.
See, he was making a good point, and I thank him for that, because it's exactly the type of attacks I get from the general community if I present this material. If objects ejected from galaxies are quasars, they should be both redshifted and blue shifted, which they're not. Redshift was supposed to be proof for the expansion of the universe. If that's falsified, the proof for the expansion goes away. If the universe is not expanding, then the Big Bang is the big bust. Does brightness equal distance? Distances are estimated assuming the brightness of an object goes down with the inverse square of the distance. That's what's called the inverse square law, and its dependence on brightness is the key step which permits finding relation between distance and redshift. The inverse square law is a pivotal idea used for finding large-scale distances. But astronomers were wrong about the use of this idea already. They believed that the Milky Way was much larger than it actually is for a period of time because the stars in the center of the Milky Way appeared very faint. What they didn't calculate when they did that was that there's a lot of dust and debris in the middle of the Milky Way, and therefore they had an apparent magnitude that was much luminosity, brightness, that was much less than they would have expected. Once they corrected for that, they got a better idea of how big the thing was. The problem with measuring by luminosity, by using the inverse square law, is that we really know what the real luminosity, the real brightness of a star is if we're not there? We don't, because we don't know how far away it is and we don't know what type of star it is. Our sun is a G2 yellow dwarf. It is 95% bigger than all other stars in the galaxy. It gives off yellow-white light. Most stars, 75% of stars, are red dwarfs. They are about a third the size of our sun and give off only red darker spectrum. If we don't know what the magnitude is, what the brightness is, we have real difficulty figuring out how far away something is. Before 1930, astronomers used the inverse square law to get distances found to us close to the center of the galaxy. I already explained all that. Something similar to what I was talking about with the middle of our our galaxy could be going on in intergalactic scales, and we might not have noticed it. The assumption the inverse square law applies to light on galactic scale is still an unproved assumption. How would we ever prove that the inverse square law or the redshift actually works? You'd have to get out there and measure it and actually find out how far away it is. What's our chances of getting there anytime soon? It ain't happening. Okay, the three pillars of the Big Bang. Origin of the elements is not explained. They've got no way to get all the big, heavy elements. Expansion of the universe is not confirmed. Microwave background radiation is not what's predicted, but there's even more. We have what's called the faint sun paradox. Stellar development models say our sun should have been much dimmer over 3 billion years ago. It says that as it uses up and compacts more, it uses more energy and gets brighter. That our sun is actually brighter and stars get brighter as they age. You see this with a light bulb. What happens to a light bulb just before it blinks out? It gets its brightest. Well, if our sun was much dimmer than it was today, 3 billion years ago, guess what it's like here on Earth if it's a lot dimmer, giving off a lot less heat and energy.
Colder.
Yeah, snowball Earth. In snowball Earth, 3 billion years ago is when life is supposed to have formed on this planet. Do you get life if all chemical reactions are frozen? Nope. This is a real problem for evolutionists. The winding problem. Old galaxies should be tightly wound around their center. When you look at galaxies, they have these beautiful spirals. Problem. These outside arms are moving much faster. They have much greater velocities than the center. So what should happen in 13 billion years? They should wind themselves into a total mess. And yet we see these beautiful spirals showing that they haven't been around that long. That's called the winding problem. Distances in the universe are measured based on luminosity, redshift, and the assumption that light speed is about 186,000 miles per second and is constant. It stays the same. We have been nowhere else and don't know that c, that's the letter they use for the speed of light, is constant.
Haven't we proven that gravity affects the speed of light?
It not only affects the speed of light, it affects the direction of light and the direction of redshift and other things. Some data suggests that the speed of light is decaying, that over time it's getting slower and slower, that it was once faster than it is today. We also do not know what the one-way speed of light is. The only way that we've ever measured the speed of light is we've taken a light source, bounced it off a mirror, collected it back, and measured the time that it took from there to there. We don't know what the one-way speed is, and it is theorized the one-way speed may be infinite. We just don't know. Here's some data from Settlefield. This data shows that over the past 400 years, the speed of light once was larger and now is getting what? Smaller with time. Now, how good were our instruments measuring the speed of light 450 years ago? Not good. So this is debatable data. But for the people who want to say the speed of light was once infinite and has now gotten slower, there's some data to support that. We don't know the speed of light is the same everywhere else in the universe. We've only been here. We don't know if the speed of light at Alpha Centauri is a little faster. We don't know that the universe's inverse square law works elsewhere because we haven't been there. Thus, we don't know our estimation of distances are anywhere accurate. Stars could be closer than estimated and light much faster outside our solar system without knowing it. We simply haven't been out there. Folks, this stuff is not all worked out. Not enough antimatter. According to the Big Bang, when everything exploded, that explosion separated the nothing into two pieces, matter and antimatter, and there should have been an equal amount of matter and antimatter. And if you brought it all back together, they'd cancel each other out and you get back to nothing. Fortunately for us, we don't find an equal amount of antimatter. Antimatter exists, but we only find microscopic amounts. Why is that good for us? We don't have another universe trying to blow us up. Because when the two come into contact, they cancel each other out. Each particle of antimatter is supposed to be an exact copy of its identical matter particle except with opposite charge. We are not finding nearly enough antimatter as the Big Bang predicts. It is all a guess. Scientists have no scientific explanation for the Big Bang, I call it the Big Bust, occurring. No explanation for how the primordial particle came to be. The first question Joe asked, how did you get everything in the universe from nothing? Incidentally, I know the answer to that. What do you get out of nothing?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Way to go.
Differ on composition of the original cosmic egg. They got all sorts of stories about that cosmic egg. It's not all worked out. Reliance on randomness. Basically, they say we don't know. To account for the observed differences in density field lumpiness in the universe, cosmologists use quantum fluctuations in dark matter without explaining except randomness in dark matter must exist in our physics to work out. You want to get me mad? Start talking about two fairy tales, dark matter and dark energy. How has dark matter ever been observed? Never. They depend upon it for the description of the motions of all the galaxies and superclusters, but this is something that has never been observed and we don't even know what its properties would be. Interpret the evolutionist, stuff happens. Well, that's deep science. This is a supposed picture of everything that occurred. You had the Big Bang, then you had the inflation in which everything was flung across the entire universe in seconds, traveled at hundreds of thousands of times the speed of light.
Question.
Yes?
That looks like a cannon.
Yep.
Wasn't the Big Bang circular and everything expanded?
Yeah, because you're only dealing in 2D. Yeah, you are correct. But this is supposed to represent the Big Bang, then you have the inflation, and then you have that 400 million year period of the dark ages when nothing formed because it was all plasma. And then you have the formation of stars, then planets, then galaxies, solar systems, etc. from that point forward. But that's not what we're seeing when we're looking at James Webb. Yes, sir?
What caused the Big Bang?
According to them, it was a fluctuation in the nothing. I don't see how you get a fluctuation in the nothing. Yeah.
Nothing fluctuated, nothing.
When I was teaching, I used to have a 5th period class. There was nothing going on in that 5th period class, and it didn't matter how much fluctuations I did, there was nothing going on. In fact, I was starting to wonder whether there was intelligent life in my 5th period class.
I have about 10 questions to ask you, but I don't want to hold it.
Go for it.
So I'll ask you after the
Okay. The Copernican principle. 1512, they believed, up until 1512, they believed in the Ptolemaic or Earth-centric system. They believed that the Earth was the center of the universe and that the sun, moon, stars, and the whole universe revolved around the Earth. Seemed to make sense from what they saw up there. Well, in 1512, Nicholas Copernicus, looking through a telescope that had been invented by Galileo, said, no, that's not right. We are revolving around the sun, and so are the other planets.
He got in trouble for that.
Oh, he got in a lot of trouble for that. He and Galileo were boiled in hot water. They literally. One of them was excommunicated. The other one just kept his mouth shut and that kind of stuff to some extent. Copernicus, the sun, not the earth, is the center of the solar system. His work neither proved nor implied anything about our position on a cosmic scale. But this is what evolutionists have done with his work. They've said that it assumes, it's a philosophy, there's nothing special about the Earth's location in the universe. Our Earth, and I have a video over here called The Privileged Planet. Our Earth only has 200 things that were specifically designed to make sure life occurred. If any one of those 200 things were not true, the magnetic force between a proton and electron, the gravitational constant, if any of those things were tweaked in any way, we wouldn't exist. Life could not exist here. This place was specifically designed by a designer, which was God. But the Copernican principle, and incidentally, Nicholas Copernicus is turning over in his grave with what they call the Copernican principle, is the idea that there's nothing special about the Earth whatsoever, because it's no longer the center of the universe.
Must be that dark nothing, Johnny.
The dark nothing. Cosmologists suppose the structure of the universe would look the same from any point in the universe as it does from Earth. Copernicus would disagree with what they call the Copernican principle. No evidence. We have never seen the universe from any distance from Earth that would allow Copernican to be tested. The Copernican principle pertains to origin science rather than operational science. There's two different types of science here. Operational science. Can I test whether a wire conducts a certain amount of electricity and will run a motor? Yes, I can test that. Can I test how far away the Andromeda Galaxy is? No. It's based upon assumptions. That's the difference between operational science and origin or historical science. Such an assumption is necessary to an evolutionary cosmology since the odds of the universe, let alone any type of life being at a special location by chance, would be astronomically small. The Earth being in a special place would suggest special creation and intelligent design, and they don't want to go there. No observational evidence for the Copernican principle. The direct observation of galactic redshift is so uniform around us that it naturally suggests we are very near the center of the universe. This is not only a special location, but if we are at the center of the universe, which the Bible would suggest, because it says, first, on the first 3 days of creation, He created everything here, and then He did what? Stretched out the heavens from here. That would be consistent with the Bible. In the unbounded universe of the Big Bang, there's no edge and as such no center. In a bounded universe, there's an edge and there's a definite center. As it turns out, there's evidence for such a center, and that the Earth is within 100,000 light years of it. And on the scale of the universe, that's close.
So maybe this is where the Big Bang happened, huh? Right here.
That's what they would... You won't get them to say that because that's too close to blowing up the Copernican principle, so they won't even give you that one. They won't give you that one. I'm not going to go through galactic redshift, which shows that we are with it close to the center.
Which is interesting.
When they redid the WIMAT data, I told you about that first satellite that went up there and measured the background radiation. Remember I told you that the radiation was so small that it was below their sensors to measure it.
Yes.
So they sent up, 40 years later, another satellite with much better detection. And it showed this dipole set. It showed a picture of the heat map of the whole universe. Number one, does it have the differences they need? No, the differences on that map are less than a 10,000th of a degree. The universe is still too homogeneous. But there is symmetry. There are symmetry dipoles on both sides, and it showed that the entire universe is lined up with the plane of this solar system. That would be a major miracle. Unless it was all designed for us, all designed for life. That's why evolutionists call this the axis of evil, because they don't want to believe this. Stars shouldn't exist. No means in the Big Bang for original stars to form. Dr. Harold Schlusser, now retired, in fact, I think Schlusser's dead. He used to be at UTEP 30 years ago. He presented freshman physics students with a problem. They're to compare the vapor pressure of hydrogen gas against the gravitational attraction of hydrogen atoms. Whenever you try to put gas in a aerosol bottle, you squeeze the trigger and what happens? It comes out because it wants to expand. They were given a physics problem their first night of physics class. Compare the vapor pressure that wants to force it apart with the gravitational attraction of the atoms to bring them together. When they came up for the next class, what they would have figured out is that the value of the vapor pressure forcing the molecules apart is 40 times greater than gravitational attraction. Gravitational attraction, gravity is actually a very weak force. The only reason we have problems getting away from the Earth is because the Earth is big. And the Earth can't get away from the Sun because the Sun is bigger. They cannot simply happen together. They must be forced together. But what's the whole idea of the nebular hypothesis of the solar system? That originally there was just a bunch of dust and gas rotating in a big swirl, and that they collected together to make the sun and the planets together. Except the physics says that that vapor pressure will force them apart and not let them collapse together unless you force it. Then you have to have something to force it together. There are 5 theories on how gases could be forced together to get stars. Among them are the explosion of supernova and the formation of other stars. But all of these theories require stars to be present before you get other stars. That don't work.
Chicken before the egg.
This is the chicken before the egg, yeah. That's exactly what it is. There hasn't been any theory for how the original stars came to be until the tooth fairy of dark matter came along. And I'm never going to be kind to dark matter. Because it's not science. It's never been observed. And they assign all sorts of properties for this thing just out of their head. It's philosophy. 1933 and 1998, the Big Bang model was shown to have serious mathematical discrepancies between observation and expectation. In response, the Big Bang cosmologists have invented 2 concepts that violate Occam's razor. Does anybody know what Occam's razor says?
Isn't it when everything else is,
When you've got 3 or 4 competing ideas,
it's the most simple?
the simplest one is usually the answer. And if we find that all of our observations for the Big Bang are wrong, guess what? It's wrong. And the current understanding of physics, in order to keep their calculations consistent, every time that they have found a problem with the Big Bang, do they throw it out? No, they invent something to keep it going. Dark matter. 1933, Fritz Zwicky observed that the Coma supercluster was rotating too fast for its own gravity to hold together. Not only should those galaxies that I showed you not be spirals anymore, they should have wound themselves into a mess. But the outside is moving so fast they should have just flung off into space. But somehow they're hung together.
A few years later, Jan Oort made a similar deduction about our own galaxy. Astronomers had invented the concept of dark matter to explain the similar discrepancies in the observations of galaxies and galactic groups, clusters and superclusters. 1998, two separate teams of observers developed evidence that the expansion of the universe, instead of slowing down, is in fact accelerating. And in point of fact, it's not only accelerating as Hubble found in 1924, it's accelerating faster than we thought it was. Why should it be accelerating faster? Well, they say, well, there's some dark energy out there we can't see. What scientific evidence do they have for dark energy? I will tell you that it's a round number. Nothing, except they dreamed it up. Lacking any other explanation, they invented the concept of dark energy to explain the acceleration. We have now invented the tooth fairy twice. According to cosmologists today supporting the Big Bang, 75% of the whole universe is made of dark energy, except you can't see it, we can't describe it. We don't know what it is. 21% is dark matter, which has never been observed. And what you see, the stars, moon, and everything else, is the 4% of normal matter. What scientific, observational evidence do they have for this?
Nothing.
Again, it's a round number. Nothing.
It falls into dark matter.
As anti-creation as most evolutionists are, they are some of the most creative people around. They create junk all the time. And they sell it as, we have worked it all out, this is proved, this is settled science, we know this. They don't know squat. The current problem involving a mass estimate and astronomical observation has shown that it's been known since the 1930s, when astronomers first found serious differences between masses they inferred by examining orbital speeds and masses they inferred by measuring stellar, galactic, and other visual magnitudes. Again, what did they do? They fudged the data. That's the simple answer for that whole paragraph. For 100 years, scientists have been trying to combine the theories of general relativity and quantum mechanics together into a coherent theory of quantum gravity. That was the whole idea of Einstein's career for the last 15 years of his life. This is a requirement for explaining how the Big Bang could have occurred. They have been unable to do so for the past 100 years. It's not all worked out. Big Bang does not explain the origin of the elements. We don't know where they came from. The stars, interstellar dust, and the universe itself simply are made of a combination of elements which the Big Bang did not predict and cannot explain. It did not predict the accelerated expansion of the universe. That's why they invented dark energy. Cosmic microwave background radiation appears not to be what the Big Bang predicted. It is not proof of the Big Bang. We have no evidence how it started. It cannot explain how we got stars. There's not nearly enough time for superstructures. And of course, it only violates the first and second law of thermodynamics as well as general relativity. So why are they still holding to this theory?
Because they do not acknowledge God.
Because otherwise you're saying somebody did it. And they will believe in the tooth fairy before believing in that one. We've given you more than 60 examples of things not worked out in the Big Bang cosmology. It's not all worked out. An alternative explanation came from a Jew, Dr. Moeshi Kamerli. This guy is not a creationist. But he came up with this idea of cosmological relativity. In 1996, 2 years before cosmologists observed the apparent acceleration of the universe, Dr. Kamerli predicted the appearance of acceleration using a new cosmological model we call CR, or cosmological relativity, that assumes space velocity continuum, not Albert Einstein's space-time. One thing that the Big Bang never does, and that a good scientific theory will do, it will be predictive. It will tell you this is what our model says, and let's go out and find out whether that actually occurs. CR did that, whereas the Big Bang is a big bust every time, and they have to invent something for it. John Hartnett, pictured there, developed the concept further and has now solved the problem of spin curves of galaxies, clusters, and the apparent acceleration of the universe without the need for dark matter and dark energy. This idea fits with the Bible, and you don't need to invent two tooth fairies to do it. This solution also requires discarding the Big Bang model and assuming instead that God created the cosmos exactly as the Bible says. Hartnett also claims a bounded universe having our galaxy at its center and a solution to the light time problem. Their solution to the light time problem is that when God stretched out the universe from here, He did it in an instant or a very short period of time, and that everything experienced a huge amount of time dilation. And because of that, you could have huge amount of time out there at the edge of the universe, whereas you only have 6,000 years worth of time here in the center. No need for dark matter. The velocity of the Hubble expansion has been added to general relativity by Moshe Carmeli, and this resulted in new equations of motion for the expanding universe. Supernova redshift data using Carmeli's theory fit Carmeli's theory without the inclusion of dark matter. We don't have to have the tooth fairies. It all works. The differences in radial velocities in different parts of the galaxies have been derived from CR. Under his system, these things do hang together, even though the outside arms are rotating faster. But the fact that they haven't spun themselves into a weird setup shows that they may be young. In CR, you have far less arbitrary unknowns, as opposed to the Big Bang cosmology. In the Big Bang cosmology, if they don't invent something, they just hand wave and say, well, that's the way it had to happen. You ask the simple question, Joe, where did everything come from? How was there an instability in the nothing? Well, there just was. Is that a good answer for science class? Incidentally, if I'd given that one during science class, I would have gotten an F. There just was. Equations of motion for observed rotation of spiral galaxies have been derived from Carmeli's theory without the need for dark matter. Such motions cannot be derived directly from Newtonian general relativity equations. This is a better system. If you do a search for the Big Bang on Google, how many hits will you get? Millions. Millions of articles on the Big Bang. If you do a Google search for Moshe Carmeli's cosmological relativity, how many hits will you get? About 3. Because this is not being paid attention to. Why? A new theory that would apply to bounded universe becomes extremely viable theory for creation of the universe, and it's consistent with God's accounts of Genesis. And it can be paired with the expanding bubble idea that Humphrey had. There are several possible reconciliations between the present speed of light, a universe of tremendous size, and a historical record listing slightly more than 6,000 years of Earth's history, beginning at creation. The best is that time on Earth was tremendously dilated in relation to the time of the universe beyond Earth. And as I told you, that's what you get when you rapidly roll out the entire universe from here. Everything else is dilated while we stay in one time bubble. The Big Bang is not all worked out. Instead, it has huge problems. Cosmological relativity fits the observed data much better without inventing an unobserved dark matter and dark energy. CR and Humphrey's bubble are not even considered because of their potential religious implications and the threat to the Big Bang institutions. At this point, the Big Bang is an institution. People's entire careers and the careers of universities and telescope sites are all based upon it. You can believe the Bible and science, but you're going to have to believe in good science, not in philosophy. Your thoughts and questions?
Is this Carmeli theory, is it like how God said the oceans go this far and no further, is saying like our Milky Way goes this far and no further?
I kicked out a slide on this because I tried to make this as simple as possible. Here basically is what Carmeli's theory says. According to Einstein, we live in four dimensions. We live in length, width, height, and time, and that everything is part of this space and time continuum. Carmelli says we live in length, width, space, and time, but there's a fifth dimension of space velocity, of the movement of space expanding. And when he throws in that fifth dimension, everything works. But it works too good. Because when you bound the thing and say there isn't an endless universe, that there's a bounded universe, it shows that everything looks the same from here simply because we are at the center of the universe. That is way too close to the Bible. Therefore, they aren't even going to nibble on that. Anything else? Yes?
Okay. So recently when I was talking about this stuff with somebody, they brought up the evidence of UFOs. Do you address any of that ever?
We have, you know, for the first 10 years I was a creationist, I would not touch that with a 10-foot pole because I did not want to look like somebody with aluminum foil on their head trying to protect myself. But now we have enough data. I don't know that I have it with me. There's both a book and a movie by Creation Ministries International, which dictate this real well. UFOs exist, but they don't exist as little green men. UFOs are most likely visitations by demons and spirits. The things UFOs do, I don't care how advanced the civilization, are physically impossible. One of the things UFOs have been reported to do is be going thousands of miles an hour and then taking a 90-degree left turn. That violates the laws of physics. The people inside that craft would be smashed against the bulkhead like soup. You can't do it. But something that's not part of this reality, something that's in the spiritual realm that has no physical bodies, could do that. And so the answer I give, which I wouldn't even touch 20 years ago, is that, yes, UFOs, there's too many people who've had sightings, too many people who've had reports of being abducted. But what's occurring is they are dealing with the spiritual realm. They're dealing with demons.
That makes sense.
Anything else?
There was an author and researcher, Emmanuel Velikovsky, a Jewish, Messianic Jew. And he wrote, he was a contemporary of Einstein, a little bit younger, but they had their debates. And again, he was like this gentleman with the cosmology theory, in that he was giving explanations, biblical type explanations for all these things. And he was really shut down by the scientists.
He was not only ignored, he was ridiculed.
Yes.
Velikovsky was ridiculed, and people like Dr. Harris, who put together this presentation for us, he's a great reader of Velikovsky.
Yeah, and Velikovsky, it's not easy to read, so if you try to read it, you know, be
No.
prepared.
No.
He's deep stuff.
Now, you've got to have a 150 IQ plus a background in astronomy and astrophysics, which most of us don't have.
But yeah, he gives a lot of biblical explanations for a lot of these things. Interesting.
Anything else? I applaud you for everybody sitting here and going through this stuff. Believe it or not, I dumbed this down as much as I could because these are tough questions. The one point I want to get across is the Big Bang proves science. No. Can you believe the Bible and that God created just as he said that he did it there? Yes, you can. And the creationists not only have answers, we have better answers than the Big Bang.
Thank you, Jesus.
Thank you, Jesus. That's a true statement, because he created science. Yeah. Last question for the day. Do we want to go with our current schedule of the Defaithing of America next week and Incredible Creatures that Defy Evolution on March 26th? On that one, if we do that one, I will probably simply show the film Incredible Creatures that Defy Evolution by Dr. Joe Martin. He does a tremendous job with that. Or do you want to do dinosaurs in the Bible or radiometric dating, carbon dating? if we don't get to these now, I will do them in the fall, because we will have another 6 sessions during the fall.
I'd rather do the 2 you already got scheduled.
Do what we have scheduled,
That's what I'd like, yeah.
all right? I
Can we
had-
take a vote?
Huh?
Can we take a vote?
We can take a vote on that. I had one person who's not here who requested they want to see dinosaurs in the Bible. Okay, let's do it this way. First off, just votes of who wants to stay with the current setup as opposed to changing it. Who says stay with the way it is? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Who wants to change it? We got 2 that want to change it, and actually I'll throw in a third because again there's somebody not here who wanted to change it. But we're gonna lose, and we're gonna stay with the current stuff. But I will cover all of that, dinosaurs in the Bible and radiometric and carbon dating, in the fall.
There's also one of those booklets on the carbon dating stuff. I grabbed it and read
Yeah,
that.
there's booklets on both of these things, and if you want to see the presentation that we're talking about, dinosaurs in the Bible, radiometric and carbon dating, it's on our website on YouTube.
Yeah, I'm watching it now.
Yeah.
Is there a YouTube video on dinosaurs on the Bible? Did I see that?
Yes.
There is, okay, I haven't got
Yes.
that far.
It's linked on our website. Yep. Let's close in prayer. Lord God, thank you for these people. Thank you for their faith. Thank you for giving us solid evidence to show our faith is not some pie in the sky, some believing on a star, some just hoping that you're there. Ours is a reasoned faith based upon not only your word, but your science. And we thank you for that. Protect these people. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.